This is The World of Work, and I'm your host, Shep Cohen. And our guest today is about a 88-year-old man who does not live by the rules of a 5 o'clock world. He's been working since he's about 20. He's now, as I said, 88, and he's a DJ on WABC radio, and he's been around for many years, going back to the early 1960s and before that. His name is Bruce Morrow, Cousin Brucie. And Cousin Brucie is going to be heard this afternoon on my show. I interviewed him a little while ago, and we pre-recorded the show, which you're going to hear today. But I just want to tell you a little bit about Cousin Brucie. He started his radio career on WINS. He then went to 1961. He then went to WABC radio as one of the good guys, the All-Americans, and made his mark as one of the top DJs, if not the top DJ, in the history of rock and roll music. He's been a stellar guy for a long, long time. I met him a few weeks ago at a reunion of people who went to the Catskills in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. And I asked him if he'd come on my show, and he immediately said yes. And I have the show recorded, and we're going to play it in a little while. I started listening to radio in 1961. We all had our transistor radios. He had mentioned that many times over the years. And we had our transistor radios playing. We'd go to bed, and we put the transistor radios over our head or under our pillow, so our parents wouldn't know we were listening to the radio, but we'd listen to the likes of Cousin Brucie, who in the early days, when he was teamed up with Scott Muni on WABC, he was on from 10 to midnight, and that was kind of late for a kid about 10 years old, but we really had a enjoyable talk, and we're going to hear it in a little while. But I think back, why 1961? Well, I remember the Tokens in 1961 played The Lion Sleeps Tonight. That's the first song I remember when I started listening to music in 1961. Of course, I listened to Elvis in the 50s. From my older brothers would play it, but when I was listening on my own with my own transistor radio, I listened to Cousin Brucie on WABC, and we have him coming up in a little while, and you'll hear a full interview with him about his career, his ups and downs, and mostly ups. He really was and still is, a real person of integrity and a real someone whose image you should follow. Getting back to 1961, where I would buy my records when I first started buying records was at Vogel's music shop in Elizabeth, New Jersey. And I bought the records there. I think they were about 99 cents at the time, and we would buy them. It was on the corner of Broad Street and West Grand Street in the center of Elizabeth. If any of you grew up in Union County, New Jersey, know that was quite a place in the early and late 60s and 70s. It's not longer in business, but it was a good place. In any event, I met Cousin Brucie for the first time in 1968 when he came to Elizabeth. And he held a Battle of the Bands in 1968, which was sponsored by Vogel's, but it was in the parking lot of Gerk's department store, which was the biggest department store in Elizabeth at the time. And it was in Gerk's department store. And I still remember the Battle of the Bands. We were all there watching. Cousin Brucie was in rare form. I remember he mispronounced Gerk's. He called it Goiks or something like that. But in any event, he was in rare form, and he was judging the Battle of the Bands. I guess he judged it, it was by applause. And the group that won, I still remember this, going back to those days, were the Wabbits. The Wabbits, that's what they would call themselves. And they played Hang On Sloopy. Yes, they did. Yes, that was the song that the group that was in the Battle of the Bands won the contest with when Cousin Brucie came to Elizabeth in 1968, and he played in Girk's parking lot. And this is Shep Cohen. I'm just giving you an introduction to Cousin Brucie, who we're going to speak with this afternoon. He's has been a DJ for about 70 years. It's just amazing how he has had the longevity to stay on the air for all these years. Before I get to Cousin Brucie, I want to just talk about a little bit more of the music in those days. Baby boomers were reaching their teens. The transistor radio, as you heard, and I talked to Cousin Brucie a lot about that. The transistor radio was in its prime. Everyone was buying them. If you went to the beach, you'd see everyone on a blanket next to them with a transistor radio. And the music was raw, it was experimental, it pushed boundaries, yet it was still innocent. And that was the 60s. And that's when Cousin Brucie was in his prime. And Cousin Brucie also spoke about, and you'll hear that in a few minutes, he also spoke about his relationship with the Beatles. He introduced the Beatles when they performed at Shea Stadium. He said he never heard one word that they said because it was so loud, but he still persisted, and it was quite an afternoon. He was scared to death, though, or quite an evening. He was scared to death that the crowd would break loose and do something. But the Beatles, as you remember, was that Sunday, the 9th of February, 1964, the Beatles were on the Ed Sullivan Show. And Ed Sullivan was standing next to him when he introduced the Beatles in 1965, I believe it was, at Shea Stadium. So he has a lot of good stories he's going to tell about his relationship with the Beatles, and when Ringo lost his medallion that his grandmother had given him when they came to America. All My Lovin' by the Beatles. And that's what they sang at Shea Stadium at the Ed Sullivan Show when they came to America. The music in those days was very, very raw, but it kept us happy. We listened at night, and we listened to Cousin Brucie. Before we get to Cousin Brucie's interview, I just want to tell you a few more things, and then we'll be listening to the wonderful interview we had with Cousin Brucie. WABC, at the time that I first started listening in the early 60s, put out a survey, which they called the Silver Dollar Survey, and it came out every week, and it had a top 40, and that was the format that they played, primarily top 40 records, day after day, week after week. And I have kept some of those old surveys, and I have one from February 2, 1963, and the number one song was Go Away Little Girl by Steve Lawrence. Number 2 was Walk Right In by the Rooftop Singers. Number 3 was Tell Him by the Exciters. And the number 1 personality of the week was Scott Muni, who was one of the DJs on WABC with Cousin Brucie at the time. That June, when I graduated from 6th grade, my brother Brian took me after graduation down to Broad Street in Elizabeth, and we stopped at Vogel's record store, and he got me 2 records, which I want to mention today. One was Easier Said Than Done by the Essex, and it was on Roulette Records, and 2 was the Exciters, Tell Him, on United Artists. And I've had those records ever since, and I have the Silver Dollar Survey as well. So those are just things I've kept, and they came in handy when I talked to Cousin Brucie recently. So that's it. Cousin Brucie mentioned when we spoke the fact that today all radio is regional, national, international. There's no local radio anymore. And Cousin Brucie, you may be right, except there's one very, very big, important exception. It's WDVR FM, where we have local radio at its best. We're here for you, and that's why we've made the effort to speak with Cousin Brucie and present his interview to you on WDVR. This is Shep Cohen. Sit back, enjoy the interview. You'll learn a lot. We'll speak a lot about a lot of issues and topics that you probably haven't thought about for a while, but are really important. And Cousin Brucie and I had a really fun interview. So enjoy the interview. Okay, this is The World of Work, and I'm your host, Shep Cohen. We have a special guest this afternoon. Our guest is the legend, Cousin Brucie, Bruce Morrow. I've known him as a listener of his show since 1961, and I followed him all these years. Cousin Brucie, why is it that we're so attracted to you?
I have no, Shep, I wish I could answer that. I have absolutely no idea, but all I know, it works. But you know what it actually is? I think the secret is I love what I do, and I learned how to use the medium of radio to get that across. You know, I learned very early in life, Shep, when you're on the air, radio especially, when you deal with an audience, you talk to them. You never talk at an audience. So all my career, I knew that I was talking directly to them, like you know, a personal meeting. It's never been at people. That's what a lot of people don't understand. So if we talk to people, right? It's a direct a conversation, and it becomes very personal. So it's a personal thing, and there's a warmth there between me and the audience.
It seems as if you're a family member. I've known you so long through the radio. It's amazing. How did you come across the idea of going by cousin?
Oh, well, that's always a fun story. Well, I've always felt that we are somehow all related. Somewhere along the line, we're all related. And if we start treating each other like that, I think there'd be much less trouble in the world, right? We'd have a little understanding. But cousin came along very interesting. I was in the studio. I think I was on WINS, pretty sure at that time. It's been a nice long career, Shep.
Oh, and, absolutely.
And a security guard came in first and asked if this lady can come in to see me. She has troubles. I was at WINS radio in those days, 1010 Winds, when it was the preeminent rock and roll music station. So the guard brings in this little old lady, twinkly eyes, gray blue hair, sweet. And I knew that, you know, something was up, because I knew that she wasn't one of my audience, wasn't my listeners. So she said to me, do you believe we're all related? So I knew right away, I'm a kid from Brooklyn, so I know somebody's going to hit me for some guilt, some money. So I said, yes, ma'am, I really do believe we're all related, and I do believe that, Shep. And she said to me, well, cousin, lend me 50 cents to get home. I'm broke. I can't get home. Cousin, please lend me 50 cents. Well, I looked at this little lady. She looked me right in the eye. And there's a very good secret in life. Eye contact. It's called eye contact. And cousins listening to this, anytime you want something and you really want it earnestly, make eye contact. That's the very first form of conversation, eye contact. So she looks me in the eye, and I looked at her, and I said, yes, ma'am, I'll be very happy to give you 50 cents. Well, I gave her 50 cents in those days, and she took it, and she said, cousin, thank you, and she left. Well, that evening, I was driving home. I lived in Brooklyn those days, and I was driving home through the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel. And about the middle of that tunnel, I heard a voice saying, cousin, lend me 50 cents. And I knew right away, Shep, that I had my shtick. I had my handle. From now on, I was going to become Cousin Brucie. And the next day, I went on the air, and I was Cousin Brucie. That's how that happened. By the way, the postscript here is that sweet little old twinkly-eyed lady never paid me back the 50 cents. But I probably owe her a few more dollars.
I have in front of me November 3, 1962, WABC Silver Dollar Sound Survey. Do You Love Me by the Contours is number one. And I see a picture of you from 10 p.m. till 12 midnight, right after Scott Muni. Do you remember WABC was quite a powerhouse in those days? Was there anything like it?
Oh, yeah. Oh, it's even better. If we needed something on the air. Now, I returned to WABC about 4 years ago. I was on Sirius XM, and I've been on quite a few major radio stations. I was on Sirius. I had 13 good years running on that. And one day I realized that I wanted to get back into radio. This was Sirius, a very corporate satellite system, reaches all over the country like we do now. It's a little different. It was too corporate for me. I needed the warmth of radio again. Radio, to me, is the most sensitive and direct mass communication medium that we have. And if it's used properly, it works very well. So I decided that it was time I was going to look around. Well, unbeknownst to me, one of my listeners who called me every once in a while on a Saturday night for a request purchased WABC. His name was John Castamatidis. And John bought this magnificent radio station. And one day he called me and said, Bruce, you and I have been talking. You don't know who I am, but I just bought WABC. And I said, you what? How does somebody buy a powerhouse like that? Well, he did. He purchased it, and he offered me a job. And I went right away because I just knew that this was going to be my next thing. It was like a circle, Shep, a complete circle. I was going home to where it all started with me, major league. And I knew that this radio station would give me what I wanted. I wanted to do radio again. I wanted to be personal. I wanted to be one-on-one. And it happened. Now, you got to understand this. Well, you know this. There's no such thing as a local radio station anymore. Radio stations are now national and international, universal, if you will. And because of streaming and the internet and technological advances, we reach all over the world. Not only is my show doing well here in the New York, New Jersey, Connecticut area, but in all the states and in Japan. I have listeners in Japan and the Philippines and all over the world. People tune in because they can stream today with the internet. So it's a whole different thing. But the problem was, how do I keep a local feel to a national/international show? Well, once again, talk to people, make it sound very natural, and make it sound like you're talking directly to them. So it works. So this show now, Cousin Brucie on WABC, reaching the world, is still feeling local to me, and that makes me happy.
I want to ask you, this is the world of work. Tell us what it's like in the studio in 1968 when you're broadcasting. Who's in there with you? What's the energy level? What was it like being a broadcaster?
Well, first of all, I don't call it work, number one. I know that's the name of your show, Jim, but I don't work. I have a good time. I play. I've never felt that what I do on the air is work. Technically you can describe it. You can. You're the expert at that. But I don't. I go on the air, and I never felt that I was at a job. Maybe that's another one of my secrets. I felt that I was having a good time talking to a lot of friends. So that's number one. Now, to answer your question, back in the 60s, there was a tremendous amount of energy. In fact, we talk much faster. As you know, I don't do that. Hey, everybody, here we are. Almost double talk. And people wanted that great energy level. But I knew that you can have an energy level without having to put out a boilerplate of cacophony. You don't need that. You can sound very energetic. And when you sound with energy, you sound like you're having a good time, and you sound like you know what the heck you're doing. That's what I do today. I have a lot of energy, and compared to 63, it's the same energy. People always say to me, how do you keep that up? You're not 20, 30 years old anymore. How does that energy happen all the time? You know what it is? It's spirit, and it's really a love for what I do. So, if you will, to bring it to you, to your audience, listening to work, I go to work, I go to my job, if I will, and I don't like to even use those words, feeling really good and excited about being on the air. And that's what it said. Talking to my friends. I'm meeting with all of my friends. It's my date night.
What do you do when you're not on the air? What do you have volunteer work, hobbies, etc.?
Well, I just enjoy life, first of all. My hobby is photography. My major hobby is photography. I love, that's my paintbrush. That's my art. And I love taking photographs. And everywhere Jody and I go, I will always have some kind of a camera with me. In fact, I'm thinking about purchasing a new one. I need a new toy. So my toys are cameras or computers today, right? But I love taking my camera with me. I love to paint a picture of where I am and where I've been, so I have this memory. And then I like to share it. I share my memories, and today we have a great way of doing it with Facebook, with my internet. So if I have a photograph that I like, I'll share it with my audience. I love it. I think photography is a wonderful way to express yourself, and it relaxes me very much. It gets me away from everything. That's my main hobby.
Cousin, on February 7, 1964, the Beatles arrived in New York. How did that change rock and roll, and how did that change your position on WABC?
Well, when the Beatles came over, the industry needed a little boost. They needed a little shot in the arm. The music industry was getting kind of, like I say, in the doldrums. It was getting kind of boring. We were doing the same old. And the American corporate attitude is, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? Not grammatically correct, but you understand what I'm saying.
Yes.
If it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? So they left it alone. Overseas, groups like the Beatles and Dave Clark 5 and the Yardbirds and Rolling Stones were taking this music, this American, and I mean it's pure American, music idiom of rock and roll, and they were adapting it to their cultures. They took it and they ran with it. They gave it a new injection of energy, and that's what we needed. We needed some energy. I mean, we're doing all right. We had Beach Boys, Four Seasons, and a lot of other, fine talent, right? But it was like getting, I don't want to use the word boring, but it was in the doldrums. So here they are overseas, and there's this new energy. There's all kinds of, these people are doing all kinds of appearances. The Beatles went to Hamburg, if you remember, and There was a riot there. And at this time in our lives, by the way, things just don't happen. They happen for a purpose. At this time in our lives, you mentioned 63, you can remember historically, internationally and nationally, we were really in a lot of trouble. There were assassinations, political strife, terrible racial strife, economic strife, political strife, and we needed something to make us smile. Well, here come a group called the Beatles, mop tops. They were radical as far as we're concerned at that time. Little did we know what was going to happen to our culture. I mean, that was like nursery rhymes compared to what we have today and what's coming. So these guys come over, and they have their other groups, other British groups, and they start working this rock and roll of ours, and they give it a new energy. Well, the energy obviously catches on here, and we had Beatlemania, and I was very involved, Shep, as you know, in Beatlemania when the Beatles first came over here, and it was wonderful, and we needed this very desperately.
I remember when they first came that Friday, Ringo lost his medallion. Do you remember that?
Oh, I'll never forget that. I think he still mentions it to me all the time. One of the remaining Beatles. We were at the Warwick Hotel. I was broadcasting for WABC. Matter of fact, because we were calling it WABeatlesy that time, because that's how much
I remember
energy
it well.
and that's how much influence. Yeah, that's how much influence the Beatles had, Shep. So I was broadcasting, and I was literally, we didn't have remote or really great with the mechanics at that time for remote broadcast. So I was on a wired microphone, and the program director was holding me by my belt in the seat of my pants as I was leaning out the window watching what was happening down below, which was a riot. Thousands of kids were screaming across 6th Avenue trying to get a hold of the Beatles. The Beatles came up in their limousine, and the kids just broke loose, broke past the police lines. The police were holding them back across the street from the wall. They were holding them back at that hotel across the street. I forgot the name of the Hilton or one of the hotels over there. And they got to them. Now, outside of the Warwick, there were these two large planters. I want to give you an example of the power of this of a crowd when they want to get to something. I saw one of these planters knocked over. The thing must weigh 500 pounds. It just was moved and knocked down inside. They were grabbing to get a hold of the heroes, the Beatles. They wanted a piece of them. And at that time, mostly girls in the audience in this riot, they wanted a piece of clothing. They wanted hair. They wanted earrings. They wanted anything that was reasonably loose. Well, I'll tell you how I found out. I was up in the studio broadcasting all the goings-on of the Beatles, which are a lot of stories about what was happening in the hotel. It was wild. And Ringo and Paul came into the studio. They came in live, and we went on the air. And I looked at him. I said, Ringo, you don't look so happy. He says, I'm not. I lost me auntie's St. Christopher's medal. Well, during the mayhem downstairs, one of the young girls, I assumed it was a girl, but it was, I was right, grabbed a hold of Ringo and grabbed from his neck the St. Christopher's medal. So I said to Ringo, was it very valuable? Was it gold? He looked at me and he said, I only wear gold because of Cousin Brucie. And he was being a little snide, right? Oh, I was very nervous. Of course, the Beatles were in the room and all heck was breaking loose. The press was there. People were filming this thing in those days, and they filmed that. That's a very famous piece of film that you see every once in a while of me and Ringo. And I said to him, Ringo, as soon as he said that to me, being a broadcaster, I realized I had a big story here, an international story. And I said to him, Ringo, if I could find that St. Christmas medal, would you say hello to the girl that took it or the person who took it and give her a kiss? As soon as I said that, you heard outside, thousands of kids. The amazing thing, Shep, that time, every one of those kids, and there were thousands of them, had a little transistor radio. Remember these little transistor radios?
Absolutely.
That's what they had to the rear. So we said that, and he said yes, and you heard the audience, thousands of them, like going, ah! And it came across unbelievably because it was such a loud noise. Well, I knew I had this story. When I got off the air, I received a call from a woman who identified herself as the mother of the young gal who found, not took, not stole, but found the St. Christopher's medal. Well, I said to her, all right, I want to tell you something. If you can get her, I want to get her to the Hilton Hotel. I got a suite of rooms, and I said, I'm going to put you up there. And she said to me, I'll never forget, is she in trouble? I said, no, she's a hero. She found the St. Christopher's medal. Remember that. And I made arrangements that day to have him come on the air with me at night when I did my show. And I told Ringo I found his medallion, and he has to come and identify it and give the gal a kiss. Well, all the press was there. They were alerted. We had cameras and microphones. People from all over the media were up there to watch this happening. And it's a nice piece of film. It's really fun. So the assigned time she comes up, and she brought two of her friends with her, by the way, and the mom was there, right? And Ringo comes in, and he takes the medallion, says something to her, embraces her, and gives her a big kiss, and we went on the air. That's how we found the St. Christmas medal, and she became a hero.
But Cousin Brucie, didn't you drag it out a little, a few more hours for the publicity?
Well, no, say that again, Shep.
Didn't you drag it out a little bit after you found it?
Well, of course. Well, absolutely. I mean, he was probably the biggest story of the day, and to get us away from politics and get us away from everybody hurting each other all over the world. And we found Ringo's medallion, and everybody was pointing right now and listening to the goings-on of the Beatles. Oh, sure. I'm sure I continued on the thing. And we did it for days. In fact, to this day, anytime Ringo and I see each other, he always says, thanks for my medallion. He still has it.
Are you still friends with Ringo?
Well, let's put it this way. We are professional friends. We're radio friends. We don't go out to dinner or anything. We know them, and Paul the same way. I mean, they know that I helped their careers, and they were always very grateful about that. Ringo was very, very warm and very nice, and so was Paul. Yeah, so I'd say, we know each other very well.
You introduced the Beatles when they performed at Shea Stadium. What was that like?
Well, that was pretty wild. Boy, you're asking some good questions. I was asked to introduce the Beatles with a fellow named Ed Sullivan. I'm sure you know his name.
Yeah, absolutely.
Ed Sullivan had probably one of the top-rated shows on television, Toast of the Town, the Ed Sullivan Show, and he was asked to introduce the Beatles with me. The promoter's name was Sid Bernstein, and Sid asked me to come and introduce the Beatles with Ed Sullivan. Sullivan, of course, put them on television, one of the first ones on television, and I had one of the first ones on radio with records. So we introduced them together. Sullivan didn't really know who they were, didn't understand their power, what was going on, but he saw when we went into Shea Stadium, there was such a 65,000, 70,000 young screaming people, most of them female again, going crazy. I mean, the pressure of the crowd was enormous. The sound was enormous. You felt it in your body. Matter of fact, to this day, Shep, I can still conjure up the feeling and remember what it felt like to be at that stadium. When we were getting ready to introduce the Beatles, we were in the dugout at Shea Stadium. It's at Shea Stadium we're talking about.
Yes.
And the Beatles were brought in, and they were very scared because in all the years they've done things with thousands of people, they've never really had a compressed feeling of people, ready to just flow and just have a tsunami. It was like wild. The people were wild in the stadium. And he said, John Lennon comes over with McCartney, and he says to me, he said, John, Cousin. John Lennon always called me Cousin. Cousin, is this going to be okay? Are we safe? They were really worried. And I looked at him. Now, I know I had to lie because I didn't know. I was scared stiff. And I put my hand behind me, and I crossed my fingers, making believe that would end my lie and enhance the lie. And I said, John, we're perfectly safe. These people are here just to share space with you. It's love. Of course, I didn't have any idea what was going to happen. This could have been a disaster. He said, are you sure? And I said, yes. McCartney then breathed a sigh of relief. Ed Sullivan and I then are ready to introduce the Beatles after several acts that, warm-up acts, which nobody really listened to. They didn't care. They were there to meet these new heroes, to share space with them. And that was true. So he and I mount the scaffolding. I call the scaffolding the steps at home base. And he's in front of me about 2 steps. He turns around, Sullivan, and says to me, Cousin Brucie, is this going to be all right? Are we safe? Because that's how the feeling was that time. You didn't know what was going to happen. And I looked at him, and I said, I was thinking, I'm going to get this guy because I don't know. I knew he didn't know who the Beatles were, didn't understand them. I didn't even think he cared about them. And I said, Ed, it's dangerous. It's not safe. And he looked at me with his eyes popping. He says, really? What do we do? And I knew I had him. And I looked at him and I said, Ed, pray, pray. And he said, pray? He turned around, walked up. Scared stiff. But I was as frightened as he was because we didn't know what was going to happen. And we got up there, we introduced him. Now, here's the nice part of the story. Nothing really happened that day at Shea Stadium as far as danger. You know, there might have been some scratches and bruises, but nobody really got hurt. Police did a great job. After when the Beatles were performing, the police asked me to escort them as we went around, in the infield and talk to the kids, get them to relax a little bit. And everybody was great. The police were great. The Shea Stadium security people, they all were into this thing, and everybody had a great time. The only problem was nobody heard what the Beatles were doing. They couldn't hear themselves, and we couldn't hear them. In fact, very honestly, here's a fun story, Shep. I didn't hear Shea Stadium until maybe 3 years ago. What happened at Shea Stadium? I received a DVD. Somebody did something, and I got it, and I finally heard what happened at that stadium. And it was terrific. Because in those days, the equipment could not override the power of that crowd. You know, I have a funny thing I always say. I think it's funny that Con Edison, our public service electric provider,
yes,
could have turned off the turbines, and the energy from Shea Stadium, from the people, would have continued the turbine and provided New York with electricity.
Cousin Brucie, Palisades Amusement Park, how did you get those outlandish, outrageous outfits that you wore?
I don't think outrageous. How dare you? Yeah, they were. They were kind of weird. Well, listen, I always knew I was going to be different. I wanted to be different. So I met a tailor from the Bronx, so don't forget this. And I said to him, I need something different. I want costumes to wear. In those days, I did every weekend at Palisades Park. And every weekend I presented another great star, another show, free show in the outdoor stadium. And he said, well, how about tuxedo? I said, well, I don't want a tuxedo. Everybody wears tuxedos and it's boring. I don't want to look like a penguin. Then I said, how about if you made tuxedos in different looks, different fabric? And he said, perfect idea. So he made me one of leopard skin. He made red ones, green ones, blue ones in different shiny fabrics. That's how that happened. It was like a spur-of-the-moment idea.
You threw underwear at Dan Ingram, didn't you?
Shep, you're going to have to repeat that.
You threw underwear at Dan Ingram. Brief showers?
Oh, you're talking about the brief showers thing.
Yes.
All right, this will be good. And this will be the final. I have to get out of here. All right?
Okay.
Here, this will be, all right. I have a habit of buying, of doing redundancy when I buy. In other words, I don't buy one pair. I buy 2 pair or 3 pair or 10 pair. If I buy a pair of socks, I'll buy 10 pair. If I buy shirts, I like to buy 5 or 6 shirts one time because I'm innately lazy and I don't like to go back. So I was buying underwear, jockey shorts to be precise. So I went into this store right below ABC, and I purchased, I forget the name of the store, but it was a men's haberdashery, and I purchased like 40 pair of jockey shorts. I took every pair of jockey shorts of my size from the store. The guy puts them all in a paper bag, a big paper bag. So I'm carrying 40 pair, pickies in this now, of jockey shorts of underwear. And I walk into the studio. Dan Ingram, who was a wonderful talent, very original, was on the air. And I walked in on him carrying the bag. And he was doing the weather report. And he said, they're going to be brief showers today in New York. As soon as I heard the word brief, automatically, without even thinking about it, I took the bag, this paper bag, and I flung it to the ceiling. It hits the ceiling, breaks open, and rains underwear, brief showers. But you can picture 40 pair of underwear coming down in Ingram. And he got hysterical. He says, brief showers, and there they were. Shower of briefs. That's what happened. Well, he is a great professional. He was always kidding around and doing things, but he lost it. That when he had the showers coming down of underwear, he lost it. He couldn't continue his show for like 40 minutes, and we both got a good laugh. That was a fun thing. Well, look, Shep, I would love talking to you. Maybe we can have a part 2.
Well, that's
we'll
great.
Do a part 2
That's great.
All right.
Thank you very much. Do you have any regrets?
Regrets? Let's see. Not really. No regrets. Once in a while, I regret some stock I bought. I regret eating my mother-in-law's pot roast. Honestly, as you hear, I'm being a little silly. I love my life. I feel I am a very lucky man. I was given a gift by an audience who adopted me right away into their families. So I've never had really regrets. I have my crutches, my daily crutches like everybody else does. And right now, at this tender age, right? I think I'm 32. At least that's why I walk around like. I still feel like 32. But every once in a while, I get out of bed and that hurts. The knee hurts or something like that. So the regret is maybe time. Maybe time. I need some more time. I need another 60 or 70 years to get good at what I'm doing.
Well, I'm going to pray for you. And I want to thank you for all the years of enjoyment that you've given me and my family.
Well, that's great. Thank you so much. And thank you for talking. I love the idea that we can talk one-on-one and to the audience. I hope they enjoyed this. And let's keep on doing what we do, Shep. Let's talk to people. Absolutely.
You've been a real legend and real inspiration for me. I appreciate it. Thank you very much, Cousin Brucie.
My pleasure. Nice talking to you, Shep.
You too. And that was Cousin Brucie. This is Shep Cohen, an amazing man. He's been broadcasting for all these years. He's 88 years young, and he's still going strong, still has broadcasting going on. Until next time, this is The World of Work. All righty. Good. It was a rare opportunity to get to speak with Cousin Brucie on the air. The only thing I can compare it to would be speaking with Mickey Mantle, the New York Yankees' great center fielder. Cousin Brucie has a friendly, positive, upbeat demeanor, which comes across on the air. No wonder he's been on the air for 60 years. His demeanor transcends a lot of the problems that are facing the country and lets us go back to a time in our youth when we were listening to music and enjoying ourselves without some of the problems that we have today. He was insightful, honest, and open. What more can I ask for? Cousin Brucie, thank you for joining The World of Work as a guest. My audience is going to appreciate what you had to say and will treasure my interview as much as I treasure it. Thanks a lot for all the years of broadcasting.